the westernmost part of Europe, the Dingle Peninsula in County Kerry, Ireland, on the Atlantic coast. The screenplay called for an old, isolated, windswept village. So, 900 feet up on a nearby mountain, they built one from local stone. The film is Ryan's Daughter, set in 1916 at the time of the Irish Rebellion. Thomas Ryan's pub is the focal point of the village, and Ryan's daughter is the central character. David Lean is the director, and Ryan's Daughter is only his fourth film in 14 years. The producer is Anthony Havelock Allen. The screenplay was written by Robert Bolt.
There's always a fear, you know, when one makes a picture for a large budget, and this is a large budget, not because we wanted to spend a lot of money, but because the subject itself, placed here in the wild west of Ireland, is an expensive film to do. We're at the mercy of weather, as you can hear the wind howling around here at this moment. If we'd made it in the studio, we could have done it in, of course, about a quarter of the time. But we want to get the real smell of the outside. And if you're going to do that sort of thing, you can't afford to make a film that is only going to be shown in small art houses.
Good luck!
Robert Mitchum plays Charles, the local schoolmaster, and Sarah Miles is Rosie, the publican's daughter.
First position, please.
She starts as a young girl, and she ends up in the course of a year as a woman who's seen a very great deal in that time. You have 5 men and 1 girl, and that's Ryan's Daughter. And those men are all of different ages, and in one way or another, all these men love her.
I think she's an average girl in that she wants more than she has, and what she has she can't really accept as what it is, and wants something extra. It's about dreams and fantasies and realizing to be happy with what you've got, that terrible tune of whatever that song is, you know. And she goes through a lot. She's a very courageous girl in that she gets something else which she shouldn't get, and through doing this ruins everything.
Johnny Mills is playing a half-wit, and he watches all the way through the story. He sees her fall in love with Charles. He, by accident, is the first person to know of her love for Randolph, Christopher Jones' part. He is the sort of unseen bird hovering over our head throughout the whole film. And it is when she goes at the end, his real interest in the village is gone. His life is over.
I don't think you've ever played a part like this before. You've got no lines at all as the village is.
No, absolutely none.
How do you approach a characterization like that?
Well, strangely enough, it's taken more homework, this particular part, than I think any part I've ever played with masses of lines. I find that I have to do an awful lot of thinking about it. People don't think I'm thinking, but I am. And it needs much more preparation than I ever really thought it would.
This is interesting because I've noticed, watching you working, that although you've got this marvellous makeup, but even with the special teeth that you have,
Yes.
you don't really look the part until you start thinking about it.
But I think that is true. And I think that sometimes if stills are taken when I'm not actually thinking and playing Michael, it just looks like me, as if some dreadful accident has happened to me, but it doesn't look like the character, although it's grotesque. I mean, as you know what happens, the mouth is all crooked, and I have teeth that I put in. But I think that is true.
Scene 459, take 2.
Robert Mitchum is playing a schoolmaster, and she's been his pupil, and she thinks he's a man of great imagination because she's taught him, opened the windows to everything she's known. And in fact, he has no imagination at all, but she marries him, and it's a mistake.
Robert Mitchum, you've made, I think, well over 60 films, and this part seems to be very different from anything else you've tackled. Is that basically why you took it, do you think?
No,
Why?
I have no idea why.
Wasn't anything to do with the fact that you were about to commit suicide?
No, that was the alternative.
Who dissuaded you from this?
Mr. Bolt.
How?
Well, he said if I'd wait until the end of the film, he'd be happy to stand the expense of my burial.
Trevor Howard's playing a priest, a peasant priest, and the great virtue about him is that he's a simple man, and he finds it very, very easy to tell right from wrong. This is right and this is wrong.
I knew perfectly well what this was going to be. No illusions about it at all. I knew it would be the best part of a year of misery, but that it would 99% chance of being a very great picture.
And we've got that very good actor, Leo McKern, playing Rosie's father. He's a publican, a local publican, and has an appearance of being a great Irish patriot. And in fact, he's an informer.
He's a traitor, a coward, a rich man, a powerful man in the village. I mean, comparatively speaking, you can see what the village is like. But a man with an enormous exterior and a very small soul.
And then along comes another character, who's going to be Chris Jones, who's much more our own age, about our own age, in fact. And, of course, that all blows up.
He's very, very bright and intelligent. An enormous amount of power comes out of him.
They're in this very remote part of the world, and the rebellion comes into their lives, goes out of it, comes in again. It's the catalyst for a whole lot of happenings in the film.
Sarah Miles, of course, is married to Robert Bolt. Bolt's previous collaborations with David Lean were Lawrence of Arabia in 1962 and Dr. Zhivago, which won the 1967 Academy Award for Best Screenplay. This one, Ryan's Daughter, is an original story.
I had an idea, and indeed I had a script in rough form. And I was talking to David on the telephone. He was in Italy, I was in England. And asked him if he would like to see it, and he said yes. And he wrote back saying no. But the letter saying no was about 70 pages of close typescript. So that his reasons for no were sort of very interesting, and I wrote back, not quite at such length. And gradually from this correspondence emerged the idea of an original script. We both wanted to do the same kind of film. And then the time came when the correspondence was no longer adequate. And so we said, well, shall we have a go at it? I went out to Rome, and the first day I was there, I arrived in the morning, he gave me lunch, we started talking in the afternoon. The next day I went in the same hotel, just along the corridor, roughed out what I thought the general pattern of the film should be. Took it to him, more conversation. got the rough outline correct after, say, a month. Then I began writing in detail, and every day, or almost every day, would show David what I'd done, and he would be either enthusiastic or less enthusiastic. We would argue, and finally we had argued, sometimes quite bitterly and at length, over every line of dialogue, almost every shot. Not literally every shot, of course. We didn't write a shooting script. And that's the degree of the closeness of the work.
He didn't write it for me. Towards the end, I think he decided, when David met me, David decided I was right for it, but not until about three-quarters of the way through.
But were you, as it were, hovering on the sidelines, hoping like mad that
No,
you'd get
because
it?
I didn't know what they were writing, and I refused to look at any of what they were doing, even though they were handing me pages. I said, no, I don't want to know, because I have a terrible, destructive quality, and I knew I'm terribly pessimistic, and I didn't think for a moment that it would happen, and happen for me. So I sort of blanked the whole thing off and just went on mucking out stables and things like that.
I visualize very vaguely, simply in terms of atmosphere. Now, the technical capturing of that is more than technique. This is so in any art, isn't it, that you cannot say whether the technique is the necessary craft is a difficulty or a stimulus. It is both at once. I'm sure that oil painters hate their oil paint, at the same time are in love with it. Now, it's the same with David and the camera. So that he says, oh, charming. He looks at a little bit of wordy description. He says, it's easy enough to write. How the devil do I do that? And I said, well, I don't know. You know, you're the man. And then to see him beginning to achieve this with the camera, and more than that, being stimulated by the difficulties into something that is perhaps better than the original intention, so that it is very much more than a mechanical translation from script onto film. It's a highly creative process.
I always say that we're the last of the travelling circuses. We can hardly go anywhere without a great mass of vans and cranes and camera cars and all the rest of it. It's as if one were trying to write with a very, very fine pencil, and one had a huge, great engine to do it with, you know? And that's one of the difficulties.
Monster though it is, it never actually is out of your control.
Not really, no. Not if you have people who can work the monsters. And I have.
Lighting cameraman on film has many responsibilities. He has to not only light, but have a good artistic understanding of composition. Well, I worked with him on 3 pictures, Lawrence Arabia and Dr. Zhivago, and this present one. So I knew David years before. In fact, as a young man, he edited quite a number of my pictures. He's a hard taskmaster, you know, to all concerned. But if you're enthusiastic and you don't mind hard work, well, then you just get on fine.
Well, I worked as one of David Lean's assistant directors over the last 11, 12 years, which has taken up 3 major pictures, and very interesting working with him because you learn so much, because he's one of the few directors who really takes an interest in the whole unit, and if they're interested in the film, and that means by looking through the camera, when you're looking at a setup, he calls all different people, and especially his assistants for the crowd scenes, and quite a few directors don't. And David Lean's very quiet and sometimes very shy and very modest, and I think it comes out in his work. You get a lot of people who do shout. I think that the director, like David Lean, is quiet. That's why he has assistants with him. They're the people who can do the shouting, but without all the shouting, he gets exactly what he wants on the screen. He has this marvellous feeling, perspective, and his eyes is fantastic. He sees things that other people don't really see. You could look at a sky, and it's just a sky, but to David, clouds mean certain things which are going to help him with the scene. And so waiting maybe half an hour or even an hour, it's worth it in the long run, because he has something which is put on the screen which is marvellous, like a Rembrandt painting, I suppose. You know, it's perfect.
Well, I started with David on the as first assistant on Lawrence and then on Zhivago, and did both those pictures as first. Since then, I started as associate producer, and this is my first one in that capacity. My day starts around about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, looking at the weather, and we have most probably 4 or 5 alternatives, as the weather is so fickle here. So that when we make a decision at 8:30 in the morning, all the transport will go from one place to another. He gets the transport off, somebody else gets the actors, so we have things going from one sort of various points to that particular location. So we all arrive around about half an hour later, hoping that they've got there and nothing got broken down or disappeared or something. But it works well, and it's the only way we can do it over here, because it is impossible to make any plans the night before.
When you're offered a film, you're said to look at the contract to see how many days you get off.
Not the contract, look at the script. See how many days off I get.
Was this a good script from that point of view?
It was, but I was led down the garden path, you see. When I'm not working, I'm standing by. I'm under house arrest.
Okay, Freddie? Right. Turn over. Turn up. Speed.
13:23, take 8.
1, 2, 3, action!
The extras in Ryan's Daughter, although they're Irish, are not local inhabitants, but tinkers from Tralee, 40 miles away. David Lean says that unlike professional extras, they had the right kind of faces. Each day they're brought to the location by special coach. They stand around, getting well fed and well paid. Occasionally, they're called upon to act and react.
Boys and girls, we've got that one. Just keep your positions 1 minute, please. Very good, boys and girls. Thank you very much. Yvonne, do you want to put some room on? Thanks very much, boys and girls. Just wait a minute, please.
Don't be moving off me and gradually work down the street and then up to the long shot.
You mean there's one of these?
Yes, that's all.
And then show the crane for the second.
I suppose the main difference between David and most other directors I work with, with the exception of 1 or 2, is the great attention to detail. If it is that way written in the script, that's the way we're going to get it, and we're going to wait for the weather, and we're going to get the sets and the everything absolutely right, and nothing will start until it is right. And whereas normally, due to schedules and budgets, we do work under much more of a compromise than we are on this. It is right on this, even if we have to come back and do it tomorrow.